Prey 2017 is a game that takes quite a few ideas from our universe and attempts to retell them in a different and more unique way, with perhaps one of the strangest ones coming in the form of the Typhon, and more so, the substance that they produce, coral. Something that not only has equally strange properties associated with it, but one that may very well be the key to the Typhon as a whole, and perhaps even the future they have with humanity. To start this video, understanding where coral comes from, what it does, and its ultimate purpose would be a good starting point. In that way, this video will be broken down into a few parts, those being a brief coverage of the creation of coral and the Typhon involved, the physical nature of the coral, including what it's made of and what it does, and lastly, the effect that coral has on both humans and the aforementioned Typhon. With that said, to understand coral and its creation, we must first look back to where it originates, Typhon. More specifically, coral is a substance created by the Typhon known as weavers, an advanced form of the mimic Typhon that is essentially responsible for the existence of pretty much every other Typhon in the ecosystem. The weavers themselves, hence, have the name that they do because they weave coral, crafting it from what appears to be thin air. It is from these weavers that we get our first glimpse of what coral seems to be, this thin, wispy luminescent web that plays a large and interesting role in the Typhon ecosystem. This role also happens to be what the rest of the video will be comprised of, as the nature of coral, its structure, and its ultimate purpose are what is most interesting about it. In this regard, coral, at least from initial observation, is seen as a sort of neural network or pathway for the Typhon, allowing for some form of communication between the various types of Typhon, as well as acting as an amplifier for a Typhon neural signal. As to what exactly the signal is made up of, or how it's even transmitted, is once again something that has yet to be answered, and even during the events of the game is being questioned. What it ultimately leads to, however, is the manifestation of the apex Typhon, believed to be the Typhon responsible for the existence of all the others, or as some have postulated, the other way around. The apex Typhon not only appears to be contacted through the coral, but at the same time can be seen consuming the coral when it arrives at Talos 1 during the events of Prey 2017. This, however, poses quite a few questions as to the nature of coral, with the first being, why would the apex consume what can essentially be boiled down to neurons? To this, there is no definitive answer, but there is a plethora of conjecture based off some facts that we know about coral and how it functions, as well as some behaviors that we can observe from gameplay. It's also here that I'll mention that the video is going slightly off the route of 100% canonical lore, and more into the realm of theory and hypothesis, as while what I will talk about is wholly based in the lore of the game, it may very well be inaccurate, despite how much sense it may make. That said, to understand the connection that I will be making concerning coral and the Typhon, we must first note the process by which coral is made. More specifically, that to create coral, a mimic must first kill something and then replicate, though I should note that humans are the only thing we've seen them kill. This replication may be what is perhaps the linchpin in the concept of coral, as we have come to find out that coral supposedly contains the thoughts and perhaps even the neurons of the people that have been killed by the Typhon, as the Typhon needs to consume something and subsequently uses biology to reproduce. Something that begins to hint at the idea of coral being much more than a simple thought highway, and more of a process of transferring thought, or perhaps even a result of the process. Alongside this, if the player manages to save and help Dr. Dio Igwe, they can be rewarded with a chipset that allows for the recovery of psi points when traveling through coral aboard Talos 1. This psi point recovery, along with the previously mentioned fact about coral, paints a fairly dark picture of what it is and what its true purpose may very well be. That being that coral appears to be a physical manifestation of the consciousnesses of the beings, specifically humans, that the Typhon attack and consume. This idea is further added onto when looking at how the coral is said to be a neural structure of some kind. A neural structure that seemingly, as mentioned earlier, comes out of thin air. It may then be right to assume that the coral does not miraculously get created by weavers, as I initially asserted, but rather that the weavers use the previously existing neural structures within humans to create it. Something that Alex Yu actually postulates during the game, not only explaining how the coral contains the thoughts of the victims of the Typhon, but also why the apex consumes it when it arrives at the space station towards the latter half of the game's plot. As the Typhon appear to be a species that survive by consuming, adapting, and reproducing, utilizing the pre-existing biology of their current prey to adapt to the subsequent surroundings, with the apex then taking all the collected thoughts of the aforementioned prey and combining it into its own consciousness. not only allowing for it to adapt and subsequently use those adaptations, but to pass them along. In this way, we can perhaps link the coral to RNA in organisms on Earth, wherein the RNA present in us and other organisms is an adapted type of genetic code that changes, not only based on what creates it, but as we are learning, based on its environment, ultimately affecting the life around it that can incorporate it into themselves. Hence, coral, from how I see it, is something akin to RNA for the typhon, at least in some ways, though they of course would not have a concept like DNA or RNA within their ecosystem, as we don't even know if they are a carbon-based life form, with a typhon arriving at some new environment, consuming the organism in that new environment, and then incorporating that new organism into their own ecology via the use of coral. If all of that is true then, it also begins to pose another question concerning the coral, and more so the typhon. That being whether the typhon are something greater than just some space-faring ancient alien species that only exist to consume, and whether or not they are more than what we take them at face value during the events of prey. For if the typhon themselves have managed to figure out how to extract a person's psyche, and consume that psyche, then perhaps they are far more advanced than we could have ever assumed. And perhaps the final ending of Prey was really just a result of us as humans underestimating something that we like to believe that we understood, all the while not knowing the true extent of what it could really be. Aside from that, however, I would also like to mention the subject of noetics. Now, the concept of noetics, more traditionally defined as the concept of perceiving or thinking, is explored via coral in the game. Though similar to coral, it is somewhat of a rabbit hole that, like with most Prey lore, stops being simple facts at some point and begins to leak into the realm of conjecture and hypothesis. But with the main ideas and concepts of coral covered, I can begin to bring this video to an end by summarizing its contents. That being that the substance known as coral that we see aboard Talos 1 is created by weavers, and appears to be the physical manifestation of some sort of neural pathway that the typhon not only used to exchange thoughts, but also to summon the apex typhon with the apex also consuming said coral when it arrives. In this line of thinking, while not explicitly stated or even canon, we can begin conjecturing as to how coral may very well be a method by which the typhon adapt, taking consciousnesses and incorporating them into themselves, similar to some sort of hive mind, allowing for the species to not only continue to survive, but also to become more than anything we could even begin to comprehend, and worse even, something akin to a cosmic horror. So with that, thank you for watching the video. I spent quite a lot of time researching and making these, and always appreciate the support, both from those like Kita that help with the technical side of the games, and others like Reployer who cover the lore aspects. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and if you disliked it, a dislike, but please tell me why, as I'd love to know why you thought as much. But with that, this is Kuyo, signing off. See ya.